Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the story behind Sydney Sweeney.
Yeah, one of Hollywood's, well, most talked about figures right now. And for this, we've sifted through just a ton of source material.
Really diverse stuff, too, right?
Absolutely. We've got career retrospectives, sure, but also interviews with people from way back thinking teachers, early casting directors,
Yeah.
plus, industry insiders, producers, business managers.
And even some more specialized experts.
Exactly. Intimacy coordinators, feminist theorists, body language analysts, social media watchers, a whole range.
And we also managed to access some pretty unique material, didn't we? Stuff you don't normally see.
That's right. Things like never-before-seen audition tapes, some behind-the-scenes footage, details from her production company, even, believe it or not, some personal voicemails that were part of the source record.
Okay, so our mission here is pretty clear. Cut through all the usual noise, the headlines.
You go way beyond that. We want to understand the strategic thinking and that relentless drive behind her career. How did she actually build this?
And maybe get a sense of where she's going next.
That's the plan. We think we've uncovered some, well, surprising connections and facts you might not have put together before.
All right, let's dive in. Unpack this whole thing.
Okay, let's start at the beginning, way before the big premieres and everything. Spokane, Washington.
Right. The sources paint a picture of her childhood there and this ambition she had seemed, well, different.
Different's a good word. There's this fantastic anecdote in the source material she was playing Annie, community theater, age 10.
Get this.
Yeah, she apparently demanded they reblock scenes. Her reason. She said it needed better emotional continuity.
At 10 years old, thinking about emotional continuity.
I know. It really shows something, doesn't it? That it wasn't just about, saying lines. It was about the craft, the storytelling, right from the start.
And that drive, it just exploded into hustle pretty quickly. The timeline is kind of wild.
It really is. Age 12, she's already self-taping auditions. By 14, she convinces her parents. That convinces them to move to L.A.
And then what happens? Age 16.
Boom. 17 roles booked in one single year. Mostly indie stuff, but still. 17.
17, that's almost unbelievable for someone that age.
It's huge. And we have insights from a casting director from back then. They described her as having this rare combo of technical precision and raw vulnerability.
Technical precision and raw vulnerability. That really sums something up, doesn't it? But there was more, right, about how she prepped for auditions.
Yes. The casting director pointed out she didn't just learn the lines or research the director. She'd researched the entire production company behind the project.
Wow. Even back then.
Even back then. It shows she wasn't just trying to land a job. She was figuring out the whole system, the bigger picture.
So this whole early period, it's not just about grinding it out. It's about building this foundation of intense drive, crazy preparedness, and this strategic mind already looking at the industry itself.
Absolutely. That groundwork. It was crucial for everything that followed.
Okay. So Love moved to what the sources frame as a really pivotal moment. Something that could have derailed her, but didn't.
Right. We're talking about a 2017 indie film, Along Came the Devil.
This was meant to be a big break for her.
That was the intention, yeah. The sources really emphasized this. We even got to see material comparing her audition to the final performance by the actress cast. And the sources strongly suggest her take was, well, superior.
So what went wrong for her then?
According to an industry insider source we looked at, it was a classic Hollywood story, unfortunately. Last minute, the studio decided to go with someone with a slightly bigger name at that exact moment.
Ouch. So she lost the role. How did she take it?
Publicly, very gracefully. But the sources indicate it was seen as being robbed of a part she'd earned. And it definitely hit her hard.
But the consequence, this is key, right? The rejection didn't crush her.
Not at all. It was like fuel. Within months, literally months of losing that role, she lands major parts in two huge shows, The Handmaid's Tale and Sharp Objects.
Wow. Talk about turning it around.
It's a textbook example, really, of using disappointment not just to bounce back, but to, slingshot forward into even bigger opportunities. It really accelerated everything.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. There's an aspect of her career that gets a lot of attention, and the sources examine it pretty closely using different expert perspectives. We need to talk about the nudity in her roles.
Right. And we should be clear, we're looking at this analytically based on the sources, intimacy coordinators, feminist film scholars, therapists, professors. It's about performance choices and industry dynamics.
So the sources draw a contrast, specifically between, say, Euphoria and The Voyeurs. How so?
In Euphoria, especially those scenes with Cassie at the mirror, the analysis presented is that the nudity serves a specific narrative purpose. It's about depicting body dysmorphia, showing her character's warped view of herself and how she thinks others see her.
So integral to the character's psychology.
Exactly. Whereas in The Voyeurs, the analysis in the source material suggests the nudity often functions differently, more aligned with serving the traditional male gaze.
Meaning it's framed more for the viewer's pleasure than strictly for character development.
That's the argument presented by the theorists cited, yes, that it's often presented primarily for a presumed heterosexual male viewer. Now, there's a really interesting data point related to this.
Which is?
Across her career, according to the data compiled in the source material, 82% of her scenes involving nudity were directed by women.
82%. That's a high number.
It really is. And the sources argue it's unlikely to just be a coincidence. It suggests potentially a pattern of choosing projects or collaborating with directors, often women, where she might feel there's more control or a different perspective on how those scenes are handled.
And there's even footage mentioned behind the scenes.
Yeah, rare BTS footage showing her actually negotiating a scene with Sam Levinson on Euphoria. It shows her being an active participant, not just, taking direction passively. She's involved in shaping those moments.
So the takeaway isn't about judging the nudity itself, but understanding it as part of a complex negotiation. Performance, vulnerability, and agency within the industry.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's about her navigating that landscape deliberately.
Okay, now let's pivot completely away from acting for a moment, because the sources reveal this whole other side. Sydney Sweeney, the producer, the businesswoman.
Yeah, this was fascinating. We had some access through the source material to details about her production company, 50/50 Films.
And their development slate is not what you might expect.
Not at all. It's actually kind of shocking in a good way. They're developing a Margaret Atwood adaptation,
Wow.
a female-led Western, and get this, a VR acting academy.
Virtual Reality Acting Academy. Seriously.
Seriously. It shows she's not just thinking about making movies now, she's thinking about the future of training, the future of the industry itself. Really innovative.
And this business mind, it goes beyond producing content, right? There was that quote from her business manager.
Oh yeah, that was crucial. The manager basically said, look, most actors chase endorsement deals to, get paid to promote something. Sydney, however, negotiates for equity stakes.
Equity stakes. Can you break that down? Why is that so different, so significant?
Big difference. An endorsement is like getting paid a fee. An equity stake means she's getting actual ownership, a piece of the company she's working with.
So she's not just a spokesperson, she's becoming an owner,
And
an investor.
Exactly. It's about building long-term wealth, actual assets and influence, not just collecting fees. It shifts the power dynamic completely.
And the example given was her Armani deal.
Right. The source mentioned that deal included not just modeling, but also creative director privileges. It's about having a seat at the table, strategically building value and control way beyond just her acting roles.
Okay, so she's building this business empire. She's making these acting choices. How does she manage the public-facing side of all this? Her image feels very curated, but also somehow authentic.
It's a balancing act, and the expert analysis in the sources really digs into this. For instance, a body language expert looked at her red carpet appearances.
And found what?
Intentional shifts. At indie film premieres, the body language reads more vulnerable, more approachable. Then, at big fashion events, it shifts more power poses, more confidence. It's consciously adapted to the context.
Like a performance itself.
In a way, yes. And then there's the social media analysis. One analyst called her use of Instagram algorithms masterful.
How so? What's the example?
They pointed out how posts about her, fixing up cars or her farm life, very relatable, nostalgic stuff often seem to pop up right before a big brand partnership drops.
Ah, so building that connection and goodwill.
Right before leveraging it. It generates engagement, makes the brand stuff feel maybe less jarring. It's described as very sophisticated algorithm management.
But then, balancing on that curated image stuff, there's this incredibly revealing detail from the source material, that voicemail.
Yeah, this was pretty stunning. A never-before-heard voicemail included in the research that she apparently left for her agent.
And what did it say?
According to the transcript in the source, she says, quote, "I don't want to be hot girl forever. Let's find the next Natalie Portman Black Swan role."
Wow. That just cuts right through everything, doesn't it?
Totally. It reveals this clear, driving ambition underneath it all. It's about wanting those really challenging, transformative acting roles, not just, maintaining a certain kind of fame.
So maybe the business building, the image management, It's all in service of getting the leverage to pursue those kinds of demanding acting projects she really wants.
That's certainly a strong interpretation presented in the analysis, yeah.
Yeah.
A means to an end.
So where does all this lead? Looking ahead, what did the insider intel and the sources predict for her next few years, say 2025 to 2030?
The predictions are pretty bold, actually. They cover a range, but all point to her expanding her influence even further. Things like a potential directorial debut.
Which makes sense, given the production company.
Exactly. Also, potentially acquiring a tech startup, which fits that whole equity, stake, and business strategy we talked about.
Interesting. Anything else?
And even a possible move towards more focused political activism down the line.
Okay, those are some big potential moves. And then there was that slightly more unexpected detail about NASA.
Oh yeah, that was intriguing. The sources mentioned NASA reportedly approached her team about possibly doing promotional work for the Artemis missions.
NASA? How does that connect?
Well, think about it. She often posts about her interest in mechanics, rebuilding classic cars.
Hmm.
There's a potential connection there, a way to make the engineering side of space exploration feel more relatable, perhaps. It's not completely out of the blue when you consider her whole public persona.
Right, okay. So wrapping this all up, the sources also touched on how people are starting to think about her legacy, right? The critics.
Yeah, they consulted several film critics, and the comparisons were interesting. One suggested she's like a modern Sharon Tate, and this is key with creative control.
Control being the difference maker.
Definitely. Another critic saw parallels with a young Jessica Chastain, highlighting that mix of serious acting talent and sharp business sense.
Sector and entrepreneur.
Right. And then a third perspective was that she's maybe not like anyone else, that she's actually inventing something entirely new.
A new model for stardom.
Kind of a hybrid model, yeah.
Right.
Actor, producer, businesswoman, brand strategist, all rolled into one.
So when you pull back and look at everything we've uncovered in this deep dive, drawing from all these different sources,
Yeah.
it really paints a picture of someone operating with this incredible level of intentionality, strategic thinking, sheer hard work, stuff that maybe gets lost in the usual celebrity buzz.
Absolutely. It feels less like someone reacting to fame and more like someone actively building an entire career ecosystem. The business side, the performance side, the public image, all working together.
So maybe the final thought for you, the listener, to chew on, based on everything the sources suggest, given this journey from that hyper-ambitious kid actor through navigating the industry's challenges, building companies, negotiating equity, crafting this image, all while aiming for these huge acting goals, is she basically just a new version of older star models, maybe combining different elements?
And is she really creating something fundamentally different, a truly new path for what it means to be a star in today's entertainment world? And, what does that imply about stardom itself now?
Something to think about.